Well, welcome everyone to Women on Wealth. This is episode 100. I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm Julina Ogilvie, and we're joined today by Bella Ghassemi Smith, who is a dynamic force behind Aurora Tech Award. This is a global initiative by InDrive. It empowers and celebrates the boldest women tech founders in emerging markets with a rich background spanning 8 years in venture capital, a passion for building supportive infrastructures for women entrepreneurs. Bella is not only leading change, but she's inspiring it. She's also the host of the podcast, The Day I, dot, 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 where women share pivotal moments of self-belief and transformation. And we're going to dive today into her journey, the significance of amplifying women in tech, and why fostering women in leadership overall creates opportunities for all of us. So, hi, Bella.
Hi, Julina. Thank you for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you. I'll also add on a personal note that before we started recording, I noticed you were wearing a garment, and then we ended up talking 10 minutes about training for half Ironman. So I love that we have that in common. But I'm thrilled to have you. Again, I think that this is such an important, we talk a lot about tech and the growth of tech, and I think it's very similar to finance. There's just not a lot of women in tech, and that's why I was so excited to have you on today to talk about it. So I guess to start, can you share first the mission and the impact of Aurora Tech Award?
Yeah, so I think the best place to start is actually talking about tables. You're probably wondering where I'm going with this, but it's quite simple. I think when you look at a lot of the world's tables, whether in finance or whether in tech or whether in healthcare, um, they're not, there's like three problems that you tend to see, which is there's not a seat for you at the table. So, you could fight all you want, and it's just getting that seat is nearly impossible.
Hmm.
Um, or you get a seat at that table and it doesn't quite fit, if that makes sense. Like
Hmm.
you're just kind of a little bit out of place. And there's like many reasons for that, but that was kind of the thing that we identified, namely in the world of venture capital, that it's quite hard to change that table.
Mm.
And so what we do at Aurora and like the mission that we live by is if the table isn't built for you, then build a new table.
Mm.
And so Aurora was built with the mind of like, we are here to back the boldest women in tech, um, namely those building in emerging markets. But the effect that we want to have is that if you win the Aurora Tech Award, you know, someone will come up to you and be like, wait, you're an Aurora founder? And know what that means, and for
Mhm.
that to open doors.
Wow.
Um, and we don't want to back these women because they're women. Like, I'm not backing founders who happen to be women, right?
Mhm.
I'm backing exceptional founders. And so that's why Aurora exists. That's kind of our mission statement, you could say. And we've been going for 4 years. And yeah, there's been some serious growth and we've met some very, very cool founders. But yeah, it's a little bit about, I guess, us and why we exist.
And can you give us a little bit of a sense of the funding that you've been able to do in terms of backing and and sort of maybe how many women you've been able to really help impact over the last 4 years?
Yeah, of course. So I think the thing is, and the misconception is that is funding the best way to support female entrepreneurs? And I think a lot of people would say yes, but we would disagree because actually, like, not all businesses need funding to do well, if that makes sense. I think
Hmm.
funding has become something that it's almost like a checklist as part of the journey.
Yeah.
Of like, I'm building a business. I'm building a venture business. I should get funding. And I always ask the founders that we work with this question, which is like, but why? So the
Mm.
way Aurora is built is like fundamentally it's an award, but an award, you know, it's a nice, but like what does it really do? And so actually when we talk about support, the word we like to use is access. So
Okay.
and the reason we use access because not all founders need the same thing. So is there access to funding? Yes. If you win the award, you get non-equity dilutive grant funding, and the total prize across the five finalists this year was $85,000.
Wow.
Um, But we also look at access to strategic networks. So, if you're building a manufacturing company, who do you need to talk to? Do you need me to give you an introduction to someone at BMW? Like, that is kind of what we facilitate. And then it's also access to credibility, especially when you're working in emerging markets. Distribution is so important. And so it's not super scalable, but with the women that win our award or the finalists, we ask them if there's one thing I could do for you today that would really make a difference, like what would that be? And that's kind of how we build our support system, because when we actually spoke to these founders and we asked them, what do you need? It was never a blanket statement of like, we need funding, or we need another accelerator, or we need some general advice, And so we found that the best thing we can do is give them very, very tailored and really thoughtful connections that allow the access that they need to whatever it is, e.g. funding. But in terms of impact, I guess, so we don't just look at the impact of like our founders, we also look at the impact that those founders are creating. And so so this year we had over 2,000 applications from 116 countries, which is honestly, like, we were so happy with that, and shows that there's
finalists.
And so 0.5% of them made it through 4 selection rounds, which included like 30 venture capital partners, a live pitch event in Cairo, of all places, and then we had 5 finalists. But those early stage founders cumulatively impact 173,000 people.
Wow.
So that's kind of what we look at. Is not just, are we helping one, but rather are we helping one to many? And those people that we're impacting, I mean, this isn't charity. These are all like very, very strong businesses, but they're targeting difficult problems. Like, how do you give agricultural women in West Africa access to finance or a credit score when there are no like facilities to allow that? How do you implement, real practices of AI, into women's healthcare in Colombia? For preventative disease analysis, like that, like every single founder we back isn't just a good business person, they also lead with purpose, and that really, really drives us, and that's kind of what we've done this year at least.
And are these founders in a similar stage of their business path, or are they all in different early stages of it?
So they're all early in the sense that like none of them have raised a Series A type piece of funding. And you're probably wondering, like, is that because they weren't ready to? I think when you're building in countries like Colombia, Peru, Nigeria, Egypt, like, there's a lot less of the, hey, here's a 1 slide deck and like, I'm going to raise capital. Like, capital is just a lot less available. Which you could say is a bad thing. But actually it forces all of these founders to just build, like actually do it and actually check, like, is there a need for this in the market? Because if somebody's not willing to pay for what you're building, like, should it really get funding? And so, to answer your question is like, they're all kind of pre-Series A. In the stage of their development though, in that, there was a bit of variety in that some, had hundreds of thousands of customers, whereas some were kind of in that point of building their pipeline but had a validated product. So we don't just look at the current level of like users, we also look at perspective. But yeah,
it's amazing. I mean, even here in the Northeast in the United States, we still hear so many individuals that have no idea where to start, that want it. So I can't even imagine trying to do this in more of an emerging market country.
Yeah, and do you know what's really interesting that someone pointed out to me yesterday, not yesterday, like in the last week? So there actually is a lot of information out there. If you go on YouTube, I think Harvard Business School does a lot of really, really great published sessions. YC, Y Combinator has immense resource. There's a lot there, but it's all in English.
Yeah.
It's all in English.
Wow.
And I was speaking to somebody in Colombia, and they were like, I was like, what's a big barrier? And they were like, it's all in English. And if you think about the size of the Spanish speaking populations or Arabic speaking populations, like,
of course,
right? So the opportunity to actually serve those people and give them access is immense. which I only clocked recently. So yeah.
Yeah. And when you talk about giving them access, are there any sort of specific examples that come to mind outside of just funding that these women are looking for?
Yeah, so I think yeah, so the way we kind of look at it, we have something we call like our gold tier of people. So these would be our finalists, our kind of top 30 of the season. So, the people that have made it through the rounds. And for those people, we give them very, tailored support. And I'm like, what can I do for you? Like what email intro can I give you? What resource do you need? And we
Yeah.
we find a way to do it. But then the next bit is the silver tier, which is like anybody that is an entrepreneur but wasn't quite ready for the stage that we would kind of select at, or could be an entrepreneur in the future.
Mm.
And like, what do those people need? And I think there's a few things. One, the can't be, can't see. So it's actually quite hard to find. Like, there are founders in Latin America, and there are female founders in Egypt and Morocco, but it's not as prevalently maybe distributed as it should be, because even if you look at a lot of the business podcasts today, again, I think if you probably went into the statistics of what a world-class leading podcast, so you look at the Stephen Bartletts of this world or the Joe Rogans or whoever it might be,
Yeah.
it's all in English, and it's all representing like primarily developed country founders or experts. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong podcast, but I see a lot less. And so
Yeah.
one of the things that we try and do a lot is we try and give a spotlight, to the woman building locally and the women doing it successfully, and also trying to share their stories. We also aggregate, where is the funding in your country? So regionally, if you're in the Middle East, like what actual funding is accessible to you, because it's
Yeah.
not that easy to aggregate everything. So sometimes it's not about building, it's just about connecting the right people. Community is massive. Like, I know that maybe in New York or London, there are so many community events and so many female founder events and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't necessarily exist. Like, they're not there, but the
Right.
volume at which, like, I was in Bangalore last November or September, and I was speaking, and I went there to meet the woman that we serve, and I was asking them, I was like, and I'd come from London, I just didn't assume that this was a big deal kind of thing. It was like,
Right.
and they were like, this is amazing. We never really get events like this. And also what's really crazy is, it's not crazy, but what I should have known, but I hadn't, was the quality of the pitches was so high.
Wow.
And it just showed me like there's this whole market that we like haven't looked at and haven't spent time allocating to, of these founders building businesses, for like the size of India's population, and the rate of companies scaling there is very, very fast. But actually the price to entry into these rounds is so much lower than in Europe or the US, right?
Right.
But it's the same company. Like, it's
Hmm.
like, so if you're looking at like maybe delivery services in the US versus investing in a delivery service in India, actually India has a bigger population and people
Right.
adopt quicker. So like, I think there was a lot of learnings like that. But yeah, so access to community, sorry, I digress,
Yeah.
but access to community and access to other women building is actually really important, which I wouldn't have thought it was, but it is.
Okay.
Um, and access to information. So region, like language, doing things and distributing things in local languages with local cultural context is really important, because even if um, even if someone speaks English and maybe listens to whatever the founder podcasts are in London, like the reality of building in somewhere like the Ivory Coast, where my friend Thomas is building a business there, and he literally got like threatened. And I'm not sure I've ever heard of a podcast in the US or the UK like
Being
be
threatened.
yeah, do you know what I mean? That
Wow.
just wouldn't happen. And so I think that kind of local context and reality of building in these markets is super important. So at a mass scale of like one to many, we're trying to address some of those gaps, you could say, if that makes sense.
What type of business where he was threatened?
It was a logistics
Got it.
and delivery business,
Okay.
and uh, the routes that he wanted to do were owned by certain people,
Okay.
and yeah, but he, you know, he
Wow.
continues today. But the point is, it's like I just don't know how I'd handle that
Right.
situation.
Right.
So yeah,
Well,
it's unserved. Yeah.
going back to this language barrier, I mean, it didn't even occur to me as, we started talking about your organization that, how do you even coordinate these 2,000 women from 116 different countries from a language perspective just to vet them, right?
Yeah. Um, we did run the applications in English actually, just because of, we're a small team and growing, but
Okay.
116 countries, okay, fine. Like you could break that down into Arabic, Spanish. Not so much we got from Asia, so we didn't have to deal with like,
Okay.
for example, Thai Malaysian, but we did do English. And I think that the issue with that is it does mean that you're tapping into like still a minority of
Sure.
the
But you have to
population.
start somewhere.
Yeah, but also like if you look at the numbers of, I think what's really funny, and I do have the statistics for this, it's that if you look at the numbers of founders in these different countries, it's actually not that many. So, for example, if we take Peru,
Hmm.
the estimated amount of total startups, and I'm sure maybe there's some nuance to this, is 1,300,
Wow.
of which the woman-led startups is about 200 of those.
Okay.
So what we're trying to say is like it's kind of a luxury to be a female founder in those markets,
Mm.
for many reasons. I
But you
couldn't
have to find
pinpoint
your
why.
way.
Exactly. And so, down the line, would we like to really offer it to people that have studied in local Colombian universities and like don't speak English? Yeah, 100%. But right now, we're actually just trying to tap into the ones that we can see and
Mm.
serve,
Okay.
because it'll still have that reverberating effect on the rest of the population. Like, for example, in Colombia, there is this unicorn called Rappi. And they were kind of one of the first unicorns to come out of Colombia in the last decade. That company on its own has been such a driver of the tech ecosystem there, you would not believe, because
Hmm.
everybody that worked in that company ended up to become founders of their own companies, and they reinvested the wealth that they made back into the ecosystem, and they created jobs, and they positioned Colombia amongst investors like SoftBank. So that's
Wow.
another thing, right? Like one exit,
Yeah.
one big company really can shift the kind of tech perception of these economies, which again, in London
Absolutely.
or in the US or in Berlin,
Yeah.
you wouldn't think that one business could do that. Do you know what I mean? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's super interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Well, you've seen that happen in the US with companies of all different sizes. So it's
Mm,
nice to see that that opportunity is there as
mm,
well.
mm.
So Bella, you came from the venture capital world. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what inspired you to, to work on this effort with the Aurora Tech Award?
Yeah. I think this might be the most interesting part of the podcast, to be honest, just
Oh,
because
interesting.
I I think like I don't know where your listeners are or at what point of their lives they're at or how they feel about their job, but Aurora is the being the head of Aurora is really the culmination of like so many small things. So I'll give you the short version. So every job I'd kind of had until now was not intentional in the sense of like I didn't actively necessarily pursue it.
Hmm.
All I knew was that I worked hard and I was ambitious. But I'd never really asked myself, what do I really care about beyond being really good at my job and
Hmm.
getting that validation? And I think you're not really asked to ask those questions. Like, no one at
No.
university or
No.
at high school was like, what do you really want? Like, it was kind of obvious, like, what
Or
you
even within a
wanted.
large organization, right?
Exactly. It's like, what are you naturally good at?
Yeah.
What comes naturally to you? If I asked you, could you create value for someone tomorrow with no prep? What would that mean to you?
Yeah.
And for me, for example, it is not creating an Excel spreadsheet, as an example. Um, and so I had kind of I was meant to do law. Like my whole life would have been about becoming a lawyer, and then I was very close to doing that, and I realized I hated it. And then
Mm.
I fell into like a startup that ended up raising a Series A round, and I got very lucky. It gave me a lot of exposure very young. I learned a lot. I'm not sure I contributed, but I definitely survived that whole process. But because of the exposure that I got and the personal branding that I got, I ended up landing a head of marketing role for a corporate venture capital fund owned by Telefonica, which is one of the largest kind of telecommunications companies in the world. And I guess like I was 21, I had a head of marketing role, I was earning really well. And
where were you based out of?
it's really London.
Okay.
But by that point, it's kind of like when you're not stressed about like, will I be employed or will I get money? You actually have to ask yourself, what do I want? Because by that point, you can keep going for promotions and whatever it might be, but actually the path becomes quite unclear. So the long story short is I thought I would burn out. That was like what I assumed would happen in my career. But I didn't burn out. I burnt out of apathy. So apathy burnout is super different. It's not you're overworked and you're over fatigued, and it's the opposite. It's you care so little, you're so unenthused by what you do that you just not hate your life, but kind of, because it's 8 hours of your day. And I kept waking up being like, I just don't get what we're doing here. I don't understand the point. It's not because the business wasn't doing anything of value, not at all. It's just because it didn't align with what I cared about.
Sure.
And so I started going to recruiters, and I started, and I read this book by a woman called Rachel called We Should All Be Millionaires, which is actually not about being a millionaire, but more about, it's a very practical
Feeling
book on
like you're a
life.
millionaire?
No, it's more like, I think the best thing she asked in the book is like, what's your area of genius? So like, you have things that you're good at that you can get paid for. You can think you've got things that you're terrible at that you will not get paid for. But then it's the thing, what's the thing that comes naturally to you and always has?
So
And I don't think I'd
intellectual
ever.
capital type of millionaire.
Yeah, exactly. And then she does talk about how wealth creation and all these things. But so I read that book, and then I kind of figured out what I thought I wanted. And over a 1.5 2-year process, I kept going to recruiters being like, I want a job with like great people, like really great people, like intelligent but nice, a clear purpose, and a profitable business strategy. And obviously they were like,
Good luck.
Like, what are you, why are you wasting my time? And I kept interviewing and getting some jobs and not getting others, but like I never took them because like I didn't care. And I think if you start a job and you don't care, unless like you have a family to support or you're in a dire financial situation, it's a bit worrying, right? Because you're meant to be excited. Anyway, so then I, in that process, moved to Dubai because I had been wanting to leave the UK for a while. I just think the Middle East has a really interesting opportunity. And I get a message from a recruiter that I had spoken to 6 or 7 months before saying, hi, we have this unicorn, so this massive business that has an award for female founders, and we'd love for you to potentially lead it. Obviously, I was like, this is spam and a joke because this job does not exist, essentially. And it did. Wow. And what's crazy is InDrive is this business that has raised from incredible investors and is the second largest ride-hailing app in the world, like Uber's main competitor in terms of number of app downloads. And I'd never heard of it. And there's many reasons as to why, but which I don't think we should go into. But the craziest thing about this business is that the goal that we keep getting reminded of in every main meeting and every town hall or whatever you want to say is our goal is to positively impact 1 billion people by 2030.
1 million people.
I've never seen a venture-backed business measure its success based on impact. And so, yeah, one of the things that they do is they bolster women's economic empowerment in the markets we operate in, namely emerging markets. And that is kind of how we ended up here today. Yeah.
Do you think you're on track for the 1 million by 2030?
1 billion.
Billion.
Yeah, crazy. So it's a combination of things. Like that billion will come from, like InDrive's core business, which is, ride hailing and delivery. And actually we have something called InDrive Money, which is facilitating our drivers to get loans to like pay for their cars. And like we are kind of like a super app now. That contributes obviously to that number because we're creating jobs. We have a very low take rate relative to other ride hailing companies. Like there really is impact embedded into the business. So for example, something that we did was we trained a load of female women to drive so that they could get financial independence through driving, but they couldn't afford getting a driving license.
Wow.
And then those women, like women always prefer to be driven by women for safety reasons.
Yeah.
And so it's created this cycle, right? So we do impact through there.
Wow.
And then in terms of things like Aurora, like, yeah, I think Aurora, if you look at the fact that our companies today have impacted 173,000 people and they're early, that's only going to compound over the next like 4 years.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think we're only going to attract better companies as the years to come. So do I think we could contribute maybe 100 million to 200 million in terms of indirect impact to the world? I think we could. And I know that's ballsy, but I do think we could, because I do think women are building incredible businesses, and we will be part of that journey for sure.
Right. And there's something there that's something to be said in the power of numbers and women supporting women, and it can exponentially grow in such a cycle. Yeah.
It is literally exponential. That's the word, 100%.
I love it. And so I've heard this mentioned, pattern recognition problem. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, there's two things I'm known for, which is talking about tables on stage and this word pattern recognition, which I actually got from my partner. So yeah, so what does that mean? Okay, so I think a comment I used to get a lot is that there isn't enough pipeline of good talent, namely when it comes to female founders. And that is why they're not raising the investment that they need. So currently, less than 3% of venture capital goes to female founders.
Amazing. 3%.
Which is crazy. Yeah, less than 3%, right? And that, like, if you take even the number in London alone or Silicon Valley, it's the same. It's not because it's an average, like it's bad across the world kind of thing.
Wow.
And I really was thinking about that a lot, because I don't like making this statement of like, oh, well, you know, it's the system, whatever. And so we were thinking about it, and I don't think that we have a pipeline problem. I really don't. I think we have a pattern recognition problem. And what I mean by that is, in the same way that healthcare is based on a lot of male precedent, I think I read something today that women are getting side effects from like kind of daily drugs, because when we do some of the tests of the average dosage, it's based on reaction to the male body. So if you give the same dosage to women, like obviously it's not the same, which we know. And if we look at like how business is carried out, I mean, think about the fact that a lot of women have not had the right to vote until like the last 100 years. So a lot of the infrastructure that we operate on every single day is not really built with women in mind, which is fine. It doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's just different. And venture capital is 100% the same. And I think when you see who gets funding in venture capital, it tends to be someone that we recognize with a very specific pedigree, a very specific geography, a very specific way of speaking, very specific networks. And we see that person and the way they pitch and the type of business that they present as venture backable. I think, and there is a lack of data to support this, so like I will caveat that, I think women build differently. I don't think it's wrong, but I think we build differently. I think we build a little bit slower, but a lot deeper. And the foundations that are set are much stronger. So if you look at recent case studies of the founder of Canva and the fact that they've hit 3 billion in revenue, and the founder of Eventbrite, both of those founders were not recognized by the venture market as potential assets. And they did build slower. And they didn't do this growth at all costs. Like they still grew, but like
in a very different way.
Yeah, and it's different. And do you know why it's different? Because like our lives are different, and we are different, and our brains are different. And like that is why like the word I use is like, we don't have a pipeline problem. There isn't a lack of talent. There's not a lack of like willing women to build great businesses.
Yeah.
We just don't recognize the type of businesses that they build.
Yeah.
And we don't recognize the kind of metrics that they hit and the time scale at which they hit them, because a lot of investment committees will be like, okay, so you've done this to this in this amount of time, that's not venture backable. What does
Right.
venture backable even mean? Like, and so we at Aurora are trying to define a new thesis, which is not saying, oh, the venture capital model doesn't work. I think it works for some people,
Right.
but we're trying to say, what is an Aurora founder? Like, what are the characteristics and the patterns that make for a really great female founder?
Yeah.
And to be honest, like, one of our statements that we're thinking about is, I actually think having a child actually makes you a better founder, because you end up not wasting time on things that don't need to be done.
Multitasking everywhere.
Yeah, well, you have to be efficient, because you
Yeah,
can't afford to be inefficient, right? Or
absolutely.
unfocused.
Yeah.
And time becomes really precious. And like little things like that, like, often are seen as negatives. You're
Yeah.
not focused, you can't, you've got brain fog, whatever it is. And so we're building a whole new thesis on what it means. And we're building a new framework of pattern recognition that's actually built on how women build businesses in the reality of the context of their lives, which again is not like a B plus, it's an A
Mhm.
plus. It just stands in equal to what we see as traditional
Yeah,
um, business making. Does that make sense?
it does. Thank you for sharing that. Why do you believe that by increasing women in leadership, it will benefit all of us as a whole?
Okay, so there's, I think, probably two main points, which is like, I do believe in this notion of you can't be what you can't see.
Hmm.
And I think a really good example of that is the change transition in sport. If you look at women's football, women's rugby,
Hmm.
that has completely changed the perception of what people perceive as great football players these
Right.
days.
Right.
And the argument that was given before that was that women were never going to be able to play at the intensity or the standard, but actually they can. And that has inspired so many young girls to
Yes.
want to pick up football, which,
Mhm.
when I was growing up, when I went and played football, I got laughed at for being a girl turning up, right?
Amazing, right.
And
Yeah.
it's
And
the same.
basketball, big, big, big thing here.
Yes, I've seen that, exactly the same thing. And those girls are ripping. They're
Yeah.
incredible, right?
Yeah.
And we underplay it, but that's so important. Like,
Yes.
seeing that you like, if she can do it, I can do it. It's
Hmm.
such a powerful feeling, I think. Because I think even like my friends that I surround myself with, even this whole Iron Man nonsense people like to call it, but like, bec- because I was able to run a certain distance or do something, and my friend sees me as another human that isn't some, like, perfect being on Instagram, whatever it might be, there is a reverberating effect even to your close circle of like, if she can do that, I can do that. When I negotiated my salary for the first time and I told my friends about it, it changes how, the people around you then go about things. And so I think that's incredibly important with women in leadership.
Yeah.
The second piece is, I do think that, depending on who it is, I think not everyone is built to be a leader, but we see that a lot of the ventures that are built by women getting funded are also getting funded by women. So that, like, 3% that you're seeing, actually a lot of that is substantiated by like women investing in women, which is quite funny. And
Hmm.
when women enter positions of leadership, you have wealth creation and you have credibility creation and you have access creation and networks. And that will naturally feed back into the ecosystem where you can give me access to those things.
Mm.
And it becomes a cycle, because then more women come up and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Um, and also, you shape the table differently. Like I said, like, women operate differently. And like, often when we get a seat at that table, it's really freaking difficult to sit at, not always, but
Absolutely.
sometimes.
Absolutely.
So the table changes, right? So those are probably the two big reasons. Like, someone asked me, like, what are some of the goals that we have? One of my goals is to create the most amount of female millionaires and billionaires, because I think that that will have a positive impact on the world. And that's like a lot of conjecture, but I
Yeah.
do stand by that
Yeah.
100%.
Well, and I think maybe almost to that point, I had a podcast, oh gosh, a while back. And one of the things we talked about was the fact that women are more charitably inclined,
Mm,
not just with their time, but when they
mm.
have the assets, but with the money as well. And so I totally agree with that last comment. So,
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I don't know if, again, this is conjecture, but I find not everyone actually, but a lot of my friends and myself, I care about like what I do every day. Like
Hmm.
as in I care about waking up and like not hating my job. And then the money is also important, but it's secondary.
Yeah,
I think when I look at my brother or, other kind of men in my life, when I hear them talk about businesses, it often the leading statement is not so much about purpose. And this is a generalization. I also know
sure.
a lot of, but it's also led about this is going to be a big exit or this is a certain amount of money. This is how much they're paying me. And I do think like, every single founder that we've backed, like when I asked them, why did you build this business? Like none of them led with, I think it's a really good business opportunity. They were more like, I just see this pain point and I want to build for it. And like great business and great purpose are not mutually exclusive.
Sure.
And it's okay to want purpose in your job. But I do agree with that statement that I think women are more inclined to be led by purpose than the average person, I would say.
Yeah. No, let me ask you, what advice do you have for women who are hesitant to pursue leadership? This is something that we hear all the time.
I I think, and this is probably where I get a little bit controversial. I think because we've spoken a lot today about external barriers,
Yeah.
right? But I think an equal culprit is internal barriers. I see so many people get in their own way,
Hmm.
not go for a job, not ask for a promotion, not
Yeah.
fight hard enough for what they deserve, not stand up for what they believe in because and I think like you need to get out of your own way. Like
Yeah.
no one is going to come to you and say, "Hey, I think you're not aiming high enough. I'm going to give you the job of your dreams. I'm going to give you the salary of your dreams." Like businesses are there for businesses. Like meritocracy is not like a failsafe.
Hmm.
And I think when it comes to leadership and putting yourself in that position, often, not always, but often, you have to get out of your own way and be like,
Yeah.
I deserve this. And we've got this word going around. Someone actually sent me a voice note about it the other week. I always say this thing of like delusional confidence. So it's like when I was looking for my job and I was going around saying I want people, purpose, profit, even my partner was like, Bella, like you're being ridiculous. But I'm thinking, if I'm not gonna like dream for myself, right?
Yeah.
Like who's going to do it for me? So yeah, I seem almost arrogant, but I don't like the word arrogant. So we call it
Hmm.
delusional confidence and we call it delulu. And it is uncomfortable. You say things that you're like, I don't know, am I?
Absolutely.
So that's I think what I would say is I'd just say like get out of your own way, like go for it.
Yeah.
Literally worst cases they say no. And then also like if you work at a company where they shoot you down for a stupid reason, again, like you could get annoyed at that company or you could realize that and I understand that people have kids and they have mortgages and it's not as easy as that but you also can control
Control. Yeah.
you know
Absolutely. And I don't know about you, kind of going back to the beginning before we started the podcast, but you mentioned the word just uncomfortable, like things are
mm.
uncomfortable. For me, one, because I get the question all the time, why do you keep training for Ironmans? Like it's so, we were complaining it's so boring, right? The
It's
training
so
is
boring.
boring. And I
Yeah,
think it's that constant reminder. I mean, I do it all the time where it's if you can get yourself through a certain element of the training, it's just proof to yourself, okay, I can handle that really tough conversation that I have to have later this week with someone, right? Or that's just one of the ways I mentally try to prepare myself. So for me, it's funny, that's not the reason I started training for these things, but now it's turned into more of this mental guidance, I guess maybe the right word. But I think everyone needs some of that. I say it all the time. I don't care what it is. You don't have to go train for an Ironman. But do something that's challenging to yourself so you can
yeah,
break that barrier.
yeah, to say I can do this like I did that, yeah, it's really powerful. I think physical challenges especially isn't it so I think at school you are kind of forced to do those things. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like,
Yes.
I don't know about you guys, but I grew up in France and like there wasn't really an option as to whether you were or were not going to play the sports allocated that year. Like you just
Hmm.
had to.
Yeah.
It's like constantly uncomfortable as a child. And then you become an adult, and like, when's the last time you picked up a totally new sport? When's the last time like you picked up a new language? And it's really hard. Like I was saying
Yeah.
to you before we started this podcast, learning to ride a road bike is genuinely one of the most stressful things I have ever done in the last 2 years. Like, it's actually not even funny. Like, the amount of times I've had to get off my bike and just start crying is ridiculous. But now, I look
Yes.
at like how well I cycle, and I'm like, I did that. Like, I managed. And I think you got to balance. I can't always do hard things, but
Yeah.
physical.
Do you still fall off your bike because you can't unclip fast enough like me?
It's funny actually. Generally, no, but
That's my
this
fault.
weekend, yeah, but this weekend, when there's like an abrupt stop,
Yeah.
um, there were a few close calls, and you're trying to look cool in front of, all your male
Yeah.
counterparts, and not be a liability to the group. So to be honest, it's a hit or miss
Yeah.
these days. But I'm very proud of clipping in and clipping out. I still think that genuinely one of the most stressful things. Yeah.
It it is. Well, and I think to your point, no matter what it is that you challenge yourself to, it never quite feels 100% comfortable, right? There is always going to be an element of that, and I think it
Yeah.
should stay, it should be that way. So,
Yeah, but you meet new people, you meet a new side of yourself. I think it's so important. Yeah.
love it.
I'm actually looking at my like next challenge, like what should it be? Yeah.
I was just telling you my race last year, and they warned us at the race you're going to go through a level of depression when you don't have a plan. You need a plan. And I was just saying to you, I still don't have a plan. It has been very frustrating. So,
Mm,
anyways, I digress. Last question. You have your podcast as well, and you've had it for quite some time. Can you talk a little bit about the podcast and sort of your mission about empowering women on that?
yeah. So I have this podcast called The Day I, and originally it was going to be called Dangerous Woman. And I'll explain why. So where did this start? So this podcast started way before I started working for and with Aurora. It's really, really simple. I think that a lot of what we see online is extremes. So there's a lot of like that girl or that mum or that businesswoman, where often the stories that we see is one of perfection or one of 0 to 100. So it's like I was, homeless and then I became a billionaire. And I
Right.
think I actually noticed that when I've been through big transitions in my life, like leaving a partner or negotiating a salary or, mm, navigating the everydays of life, right? Like
Yeah.
even cutting my hair. I didn't really, turn to the extremes. I didn't turn to Google and get Google to tell me 3 ways. Like that's not what happened. Often I spoke to the people around me and we shared stories of like, oh, well, I went, and I did this, and it comes back to that. If she can do it, I can do it. And
Hmm.
so what I started doing was, and also this question of, do we do things because we should, or do we do things because we want to? And I think I had realized that a lot of my life, I had done a lot of things because I should rather than I wanted to.
Right.
So I went to the woman in my life at the time that I respected as people that I really believe led a life that they wanted. And I asked them, could you tell me about a day that like you backed yourself, in the sense of like, you, not necessarily the biggest promotion you got, not necessarily like, and if it was that, then great. But the thing where you think it was me versus me, and like I did this because I wanted to.
Mm.
And what was really interesting is the stories were not, and I was speaking to, like the ex chief of staff of Google, the current CFO of The Economist, it wasn't like, this is how I became, Eric Schmidt's
Right.
secondhand. It wasn't. It was, this is the day I went to the gym for the first time. This is the day I learned how to introduce myself. This is the
Mm.
day that I cut my hair off. And it was like super ordinary stories, but
Yeah.
that had like immense. So it's like what you were saying is like,
Absolutely.
if you do an Ironman, maybe some people might be like, that's not a big deal. Like, why would we listen to that? That's a huge thing in terms of telling yourself, I can do other things.
Yes.
And so the day I, if you actually listen to it, is not like the big stories. It's actually the very ordinary moments that lead to extraordinary, I think, results sometimes. And greatness comes from, like, for example, I spoke to somebody that is an exceptional investor, PhD from Oxford, and outside she's married, great job, great career, all these things. And her story was like, this is the day I cut my hair off, because she told me that although she'd had all of these accolades, she never felt like herself.
Yeah.
But we're told, short hair doesn't suit people and blah, 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 and all these things. And she was like, the day I went to the hairdresser at the age of 30, and I made this really small decision, it changed her life, because she actually, I don't know, she just felt herself. I don't know how
Yep,
to explain it.
absolutely.
And it's so funny, because then I met someone else that had listened to that episode and had been like, I know I hadn't listened to it. I had told her about it, and she was like, that's so crazy that you say that. And this is the thing, is why do we not celebrate those really ordinary moments?
Absolutely.
So that was what the podcast was about. The thing is, though, and I'll take accountability here, I love that podcast. I really love what it believes in, but I got in my own way. And I think with the move and the jobs and starting Aurora, and actually the fact that it was gaining momentum quite quickly, to my
Mhm.
surprise,
Yeah.
I think I chickened out and I lost my way. And it's funny, because now I have 30 or so episodes that I recorded when I was back in London 8 months ago. And they're just sitting there. And it's one of those things where, yeah, it's the perfect thing where I need to take my own advice and just do it, because so many people have come up to me actually since and been like, what happened? And I
Yeah.
don't really have an answer for them.
Well, you have a lot going on.
I
So,
think, yeah, I don't know. I think I
well, and
don't
I
know,
think
one of
just
the goals for
exactly
this
to your
summer.
point, right? It can also just take one little small thing to kind of change that whole course, maybe
Yeah.
for the time being. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, other great things came, and the podcast, will come back, and I'm excited. I mean, hopefully this summer. But
Okay.
yeah, it's funny. It's probably the thing that got me the job I have, but also the thing that I think I just didn't give enough love to. But I also believe things happen for a reason. So
Sure.
yeah.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. And Belle, if people want to learn more about Aurora Tech Award, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so there's the auroratechaward.com website. We're super active on our socials, and actually quite interesting, quite funny. I have a very good social media manager. Interesting content there on Instagram, also on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think what you'll find there is probably but us building in public. So the reality of building this whole project, as well as the stories of some of the founders that we back, and the reality of I think building as a female founder. So it's all very funny, some constructive. None of it is I don't know, hating the world. So
Right.
yeah,
Just very authentic.
yeah, we tried to show who we are as a team,
Yeah.
and who the Aurora founder is.
That's great. Bella, thank you for your insights, and also thank you for everything that you and Aurora Tech Award and the foundation is doing. I think that's incredible.
No, thank you so much for having me. I hope hope people take something from this,
Uh,
and
I'm
do the thing that they've been, I don't know, in their way to do, I suppose.
absolutely.